Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of Sunday, October 13th, 2024. Today we are going to continue our fascinating exploration of the historical price of Bitcoin, the various properties of this cryptocurrency, and the theory that the price of Bitcoin may be following a power law. And for those of you who haven't seen our first Virtual Enlightenment Salon on the subject of September 29th, 2024, here it is. So we have our same panelists who joined us for that salon present for part two, a deep dive into the Bitcoin power law. First of all, we have our U.S. Transhumanist Party officers and members, our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our 2024 U.S. Vice Presidential candidate and Director of Citizen and Community Science, Daniel Tweed, our member from Texas, Alan Crowley of the Texas Transhumanist Party, and our special guest returning today to discuss the Bitcoin power law is Giovanni Santostasi. If you haven't read his article on the Bitcoin power law theory, here it is, where he explains the ideas that we will be discussing in depth today. Dr. Santostasi is a modern Renaissance man. He considers his native Italy's Renaissance movement to be a historical precedent of transhumanism. He has received a PhD in physics working on gravitational waves and neutron star astrophysics. He has spent over 20 years analyzing complex data in several scientific fields. He is also a neuroscientist and the neuroscience advisor of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. And furthermore, he is a financial analyst and currently the CEO and director of research at Quantonomy. He has authored almost 100 research papers, and his works have been featured in prestigious scientific journals, as well as receiving attention from popular media like Men's Health Magazine and ScienceDaily.com. And during our previous salon, Giovanni, you gave an excellent exposition of your research into the prices of Bitcoin, the various properties of Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin power law. And we discussed mathematically what is the form of the power law, as well as what is the specific power law that your research suggests the price of Bitcoin follows. But my first question to you is a question that will, I think, continue the conversation where we left off. And that is, what attributes or phenomena enable Bitcoin to have value in the first place? So you mentioned there's a school of thought that states that it's the scarcity of Bitcoins that enables it to have value, but you don't agree with that necessarily. So you have your own view about why it is that there seems to be this support line for the price of Bitcoin that you've observed to hold, even in cases of crashes like the crash that happened in the early COVID-19 pandemic. So what would you say enables Bitcoin to have value?
Okay, so let me some graphs. We have a reference. Okay.
I think you're breaking up a bit, Giovanni. Giovanni, are you there? We may need to have him reconnect, but I will work on getting that to happen. Art Ramon, if you could talk a bit about your experience with cryptocurrencies and when you first became familiar with Bitcoin.
Sure. I became familiar with Bitcoin. I remember reading articles maybe 2015, and I wanted to get some, but I actually installed a minor program on a computer. So back then, the actual minor programmer was still installable in Windows and have it runnable. But it was very crude program. I didn't really understand the concept of the wallet yet. So I set up numerous wallets, had it running. Nothing was seemed to be working, so I just kind of redid everything. So joined a mining pool, and I looked into that mining pool to see if I had anything. I didn't get anything from participating in the mining pool, but yeah, I think scarcity, like Spin said, scarcity, first mover advantage, probably gives it, and the fact that it can't really be controlled by any particular government, I'd say, is what a lot of people believe gives it an advantage. You don't know who the project creator is, whereas a lot of the other projects, even the clones of Bitcoin, the Litecoin and whatnot, you know who created it. So
Hmm.
nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. Some say it's a CIA, some say it's Russian, intelligence, but who knows? There are people who say it's going to go to zero, but who knows? My question I would have asked to Giovanni is, eventually all the coins are going to be mined, and what's going to happen to the power law then? Because the only incentive for the miners will be just for transaction fees, uh, not the creation of new coins. I think they get extra compensation for that, but that would be my question to Giovanni when he gets back.
Yes, these are good observations and good questions for Giovanni. Do you think there is any cryptocurrency that might be capable of displacing Bitcoin at some point in the future, either because it has a better transaction protocol or because it somehow, let's say, captures the attention of a lot of the market? And it looks like we have Giovanni back. Giovanni, can you see us and hear us?
I had a momentary uh, problem with my internet. Hopefully stable. I'm sorry for that. Okay.
We're still having a bit of a connection difficulty, Giovanni, so let's hope that it resolves. But what we were discussing was whether it might be possible at some point for another cryptocurrency to displace Bitcoin as the dominant cryptocurrency for whatever reason. So, Art Ramon, share your thoughts with us while we try to get Giovanni back.
The rumors I hear is like a CBD. What is it? Central
Central bank
National.
digital currencies.
That's what I hear possibly. So when the dollar crashes and goes to zero, it's going to be replaced by some digital dollar, and it's going to have the capability of having it be programmable to some extent. If the government gives out a stimulus, you have to use it within a certain time for certain things, or it just vanishes. So possibly something that's backed by the government. That's what maybe might displace it. But again, if no one government has control of Bitcoin, they could still give Bitcoin that advantage that some people talk about. And people say BlackRock owns a ton of Bitcoin, and Elon Musk, they own so much they can manipulate the price when they want to. So who knows?
And I think your problem with how are they going to keep the blockchain going when all the coins are minted, aside from transaction fees, I have a couple thoughts on that. They might just raise the transaction reward, and the other thing is there are apps like Cash App that let you do decentralized finance. There's my QR code for my Cash App ID is Permadan. It's a $ Permadan, and every time someone signs up, they get $5. I get $5. So that's a pretty interesting app because you can fractionally invest not only in Bitcoin but stocks, and I think they support Ethereum. But Bitcoin has the advantage of never having been hacked, being a proof of work, and a validation by lots of different systems. But this slows down the network, as has been a problem. But they have workarounds for that. Bitcoin, the Lightning Network, I think is one. But I think everyone should at least have the ability to transact independent of the government with no middleman. I mean, this is like crucial for the future of human freedom, because if you could argue they've already kind of digitalized the
but
economy.
the government treats it as an asset. So anytime you sell, you have to see, at what price did you buy it at, and then you made a profit. Then you got to pay tax. It's such a hassle to tax wise to keep track of that because they consider it an asset, not a currency. So.
And now they're trying to tax capital gains before they're realized, even, which is a pretty onerous trend.
Yes, unrealized capital gains are not real. They're not real assets. You do not own some proceeds from a security or any sort of asset until you've sold it. And until you've sold it, you don't own any money. You own the asset. And this is what people don't understand. Unrealized capital gains are not real wealth. They do not exist until the moment you realize them. So I think this movement toward doing anything with unrealized capital gains, taxing them, reporting them, is folly. And it really would serve to disincentivize people from holding investments for the long term.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that the impetus for the Civil War was essentially a 40% tax increase that the northern states were going to impose on the southern states. There was really a tax rebellion, and more than being about slavery, which it became about later on. But anyway, that's another episode, I guess. But yeah, 40% taxes. I mean, that's equivalent to virtual slavery. I mean, the Revolutionary War was fought over just a couple percentage points of tax increase, not double-digit tax increase. But ultimately, the way to get around this is to have independent peer-to-peer communication and independent peer-to-peer wealth transfer without a middleman like your bank or the government or anyone else. That should actually be a human right, the right to transact.
But the central bank digital currencies are essentially the antithesis of what the original proponents of Bitcoin wanted and what many people right now champion Bitcoin for, which is the ability to securely transact in some sort of currency, some sort of medium of exchange that is independent of any government. And if all of a sudden all that happens is a government fiat currency gets put on the blockchain, and then everything can be monitored and recorded much more effectively from the government's point of view. That's essentially the opposite of what especially many of the early, quite libertarian adopters of Bitcoin envisioned Bitcoin's use case to be. So I'm not sure that would displace Bitcoin as such. It could be, if it's implemented, a way to, let's say, extend the dollar economy, but the dollar economy already exists, and it exists in digital form as well. A lot of the transactions that happen in dollars or in other fiat currencies are online, or they essentially take place by means of numbers being added or subtracted to or from specific bank accounts. So I'm not seeing much of a difference between that and central bank digital currencies, as long as the central bank digital currencies are optional to adopt. But I am wondering about cryptocurrencies with more functionality, like Ethereum, for instance. And here we have Giovanni again. Welcome. Welcome.
Hi.
All right. We can hear you clearly
Right.
now. So hopefully your
I have to
connection will
restart my computer. Maybe that will do.
I
All
think it
right.
will.
Okay.
Have you tried plugging it off and unplugging it and replugging it?
Yeah.
the old solution.
That is the ultimate solution for almost everything.
Yeah, right.
I wish we could do it with ourselves. It's like I need a replugging.
That's actually one of Tom Ross's campaign slogans: is we need to unplug America and plug it back in again.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I'll shut up here.
Anyway, so let me share my slides, and we can, and you can carry on the discussion. It seems that you were discussing something cool.
Indeed. So we were just extending on that question of what enables Bitcoin to have value and whether there might be another cryptocurrency in the future that might supplant Bitcoin because it might have certain attributes that perhaps people find more valuable to some extent. And my view is central bank digital currencies would not replace Bitcoin because the earliest use cases for Bitcoin and the reason why a lot of people, especially people who are more libertarian minded, are enthusiastic about Bitcoin are precisely to have a way to transact, a way to store value and exchange goods and services independent of a government fiat currency. So that desire is not going to go away just because governments establish central bank digital currencies. But I was wondering about, say, a cryptocurrency like Ethereum, which has additional functionality built into it because Ethereum can enable smart contracts, for instance. And there have been other tokens on the Ethereum blockchain that have enabled people to do interesting things, essentially. But I will let you answer the more fundamental question, which is what, in your view, enables Bitcoin to have this value that creates this support floor that grows over time.
Yeah, and I don't mind you to keep it a discussion because it's a salon, so we are supposed to discuss ideas together. Last time I was mostly presenting like a monologue, so I'm glad that today is more like a conversation. But a few things. First of all, we say that scarcity doesn't play a role. I want to emphasize that because that is one of the points that I have problems to communicate sometimes when I discuss these things on other social media like X, where I do most of my activity on the YouTube channel. I get a lot of pushback because many people associate the fact that Bitcoin has a finite cap, that is these 21 millions that we are very close to that number, by the way. So when Satoshi created Bitcoin, he made it in such a way because actually, one of the things that propelled the creation of Bitcoin was the financial crisis in 2008. And so a lot of that crisis was due to this tendency of the government of resolving all the problems by printing more money, right? Because all these, the other problems with the financial system in general, the fact that, there is a lot of speculations, there is a lot of products that are built on financial products that are built on other products that are built on other products, and they create some kind of house of cards and then collapse and create a lot of problems. But there is no, a lot of these companies don't have consequences because then the government bails them out by printing tons of money and using the citizens' taxes to basically allow this company to do whatever they want without any economical consequences. That many times the CEOs of these companies get pay huge big bonuses to fail, basically. So Satoshi was disgusted with all that, and he wanted to create a monetary system that was, first of all, free from the government. That is an amazing thing, because I don't know many historical precedents for that, right? Maybe you had small countries or republics, that printed their own money, but it was always tied to some kind of central authority, while this is distributed. So I think this is really a first, even historically, and also the fact that it's an anti-inflationary currency, right? So instead of printing more and more money, we have a fixed cap. That is it. There is no debate, because there were other versions of digital gold or cash, and this issue actually was an open question, right? How much money we should have, right? And how that should be determined. And one time I saw this very nice lecture by another physicist, actually, and he was making a big deal about how the fixed cap also fixes the problem of consensus, in the sense that some of these early systems allowed for some voting, like you could come together, and then the people that own the coin will vote on how much money we needed to have, and he resolved the problem by saying, well, let's have it fixed, so there is no discussion, so there is no debate. So it's actually very cool, because there are some situations where, with the laws of nature, for example, we don't argue very much, right? We are already fixed externally. This is what we are, and we are a point of reference, So it kind of made it almost like a law, right? A conservation law. Like in physics, we have these very beautiful conservation laws that are all linked with symmetries, and you can almost reconstruct the entire laws of natures by looking at conservations, right? It's a very interesting topic. So he created like a conservations of money, and so it's a very important property. But this is why I describe it in that way, because to me it's not about scarcity. Even this property is not scarcity, because in theory the system can accommodate for any amount of a desire to want to be involved in the system, right? There have been some people making actually fun of these, and then they get it wrong. Sometimes they make this claim where we can divide because every Bitcoin can be divided up to 100 millions, right? One Satoshi is like 100 million of a Bitcoin. So there are enough Bitcoin that in theory, and in fact, they were scaled up in that way, more or less like that, on purpose, to being able to actually handle basically all the transaction in the world if one wanted to. And in theory, Satoshi even said we could even break it down to smaller units if it's necessary, if one day we need to add all the transaction. But this doesn't mean that you're reducing or diluting the value of Bitcoin, because like if you have a pizza slice and you divide by 4, it's not that now you have more pizza, you just divide it by 4. So that is one of the things that some critics of Bitcoin, they get attacked by the entire community, because they almost like try to dismiss Bitcoin, say, what are you talking about? It is finite. It's not finite. There are so many Satoshis. And they are wrong, of course, right? Because it's true that if you take a pizza slice and divide by 4, you don't get more pizza. But with Bitcoin, if you have something that grows, then each pizza slice becomes more and more valuable. So if I divide it, then in theory I could have a pizza. And then not because I am in Italian, so I am an authority on pizza. So I'm going to use this authority on pizzas to make this claim. This is a pizza that can feed the world, because if this entire pizza becomes more and more nourishing, I can divide it in small pieces, and I can nourish the entire world, right? In theory. So that is something that needs to be understood too. But it's great to have this conservation law because it resolves a lot of problems. One of them is this consensus problem in having people debating how much money needs to be there. It creates also a resistance in dilution, because after all, that is a cap. Yes, you can divide it in small units and be more fungible, but it doesn't dilute your investment in Bitcoin. So it's a very powerful property. But what I don't agree with is that people want to get involved in the network because of this, because of the rarity of a coin. So we are, I use this expression: we are running out of Bitcoin, because a lot of influencers make these claims, in particular among young people. Sorry for this.
Hello, Moto.
In particular among young people, they say, you need to get involved as soon as possible with Bitcoin because we are running out, right? So for example, they point out how there are less and less coins in the exchanges or things like that. They try to depict this idea where people are fighting over the remaining Bitcoins. We are going to discuss if there is such a concept of remaining Bitcoins. And this to me is a very bad concept, because if it was the case, then Bitcoin would not be much different from other type of commodities that people fought over for centuries and millennia, right? We are trying to create a new way of thinking about economics and interaction between people.
Hello, Moto.
Sorry for this. I will turn it off. Interactions between people and value, and what it means, to have a monetary system, and so on. And so we don't want something that people fight over, like if it was Black Friday, because this is one of the things that invokes to me when people say that Bitcoin is scarce, or the Hunger Games or something like that. We want something completely different, something that actually emphasize more the collaboration of humanity, working together, solving problems, and a positive outlook. This is why, as a transhumanist, I told you from the beginning, I was orange pilled by a transhumanist, by the article. And at some point, Gennady, I need to give you the article. Actually, we can put it as in the video description as a point of reference, because it was a wonderful article. The article that orange pilled me, that was written by a transhumanist, and the vision. I say all the time, transhumanism is the only non-bankrupt worldview, because all the other ones are failing. They are not true, or they have a horrible vision of the future, while transhumanism is positive. It also has I say many times, I have all these expressions. Transhumanists have the feet on the ground because we are connected with reality. If you are not, and you want to live forever, and you have this fantasy about living forever, or forever, why not? I am one of these transhumanists that is not afraid to say forever. It should be forever. We have a feet on the ground and the head in the sky, right? Because we dream big and we have visions, but it's always grounded on earth. It's grounded on reality, because it's not a fantasy, it's not imagination. It may be challenging in some of the things we want to do, but they are based on scientific knowledge and reality, on what we know so far. So Bitcoin to me fits perfectly in this vision, because it's real. It can give us a lot of incredible possibility in terms of how we interact monetarily, financially. Maybe there'll be a future where we don't, like Star Trek, where we don't need money. But right now, given human nature and the fact we are not there yet, we do need a monetary system. Bitcoin can be that. And in terms of this very doomish vision about running out of Bitcoin, First of all, the data doesn't support, because to me, data comes first all the time. So I look for measures that beyond the finite cap, that I think has nothing to do with scarcity per se. It's like more a conservation principle. I look for other type of measures that could be associated with scarcity. For example, there is this measure that people mention all the time. They call it available supply. Many of these measures that people use, I think because there is not many scholars, scientific scholars that study Bitcoin, or if they are because they actually are published papers on scientific papers on peer-reviewed journals on Bitcoin. But usually they stay in the academic field, and the Bitcoiners themselves are not aware. The majority of Bitcoiners are not aware of this paper. So one of the things I try to do is like to be the Carl Sagan of Bitcoin, in the sense that, I'm doing the research, but also I'm trying to reach, to do outreach and to be a science communicator and communicate the scientific ideas to the community. And so, I'm looking for measures that are scientific, that can be analyzed. And so for example, people came up with this idea of available supply. So basically what they claim is that there is a tendency of many Bitcoiners to, you probably are familiar with this expression, it's called HODL, because it's kind of one of these memes in the communities, is basically misspelling holding, that is HOLD, but they say hodling, because the meme, actually I've been in Bitcoin enough where I remember the meme coming out. And so there was this guy saying, that he was, Bitcoin was falling down in one of the many times where Bitcoin temporarily falls down relatively to where it is. And everybody was panicking, but he was not panicking. He was mentioning other funny things, like his girlfriend was out, having fun in some kind of lesbian bar. This is what he said. And he was at home drinking and thinking about Bitcoin crashing, but he was going to hodl, because he was drunk and he was misspelling the word hold, And so from that moment on, it became a meme, hodling. So there are many people hodling on Bitcoin, sometimes for years. And so this creates this idea of scarcity, right? Well, it's not correct, because even the people that hodl for many years, eventually they sell. There are a lot of data showing that many people actually, this is why we have these bubbles, and you can see from the graph, right? We have these peaks. Now you cannot see from the graph. Let me click on it again. When these peaks are there, is because there are actually people selling, and many times they actually, because we have this amazing lack or its design actually of dealing with a system that has all the information. The Bitcoin has a lot of information available from the on-chain data, so we know how long people have held. In fact, there is a paper from my favorite financial physicist that analyzed this, and guess what? The time that somebody hodls is a power law. You can organize the time that different people hold, and it forms a beautiful power law. So it has scaling behaviors. Even that has scaling behavior. And so, people do sell at the top, and there are cycles, people holding different times, etc. But even in that case, what matters is the volume. There is a lot of volume. There are billions of dollars in transactions every day. So it's a very liquid quantity. And this idea of an available supply, right? So I took it as a face value, because it's one of these quantity that is mentioned all the time, where we say, okay, let's look at the coins that are available, right? That is a fixed supply. We can calculate how many coins have been held for a long time. It's an arbitrary idea, because long time, what long time is, 2 years, 4 years, eventually somebody will sell, right? So we call this the unavailable supply, simply because people are holding it for a long time. It doesn't mean that they cannot sell tomorrow. So it's already an arbitrary quantity. But even if you take it at face value and you subtract these long-term held coins from the total number of coins, and then you're asking a simple question that a physicist or anybody that deals with data analysis will ask is this quantity that you're claiming it's related to scarcity somehow correlated with price? Because that is the fundamental question. Because it's surprising to me, there are all these shows, like online that are followed sometimes by tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people, and they're going to show this graph, right? And people show this, right? That it's true if you believe this quantity, where you look at how long people hold and say, okay, I'm going to use a cutoff. If somebody hold a coin for more than 4 years, we basically assume that they will hold forever. That is a wrong assumption. But and then they maybe show that, but they never show the next step. That is surprising to me, because again, it's something that physicists or any physical science or scientific analyst will do next and say, okay, but what is the connection with the price? If you are assuming that this scarcity, or because I call it running out of Bitcoin, we are running out of Bitcoin, but it's not Bitcoin anymore for being available to be bought. Is that connected with the price? It's not. Look at this graph, right? I'm showing you. I'm going to look at this quantity. Yes, it's decreasing, because you see how it's moving from left to right. It's going to decrease. Right is the largest number. Left is the smallest number. It's decreasing over time, in particular in recent times. But you can see it's not correlated with the price. It's not changing the price, because really what matters is how much money is anyway traded every day. And there are billions and billions of dollars traded every day. So if you want to buy Bitcoin, you can always buy it. There is as much Bitcoin you want to buy, you will be able to buy. And if there are a lot of people trying to buy Bitcoin, like during, for example, this is what happened during the bubbles, because there is some reasons or some excitement, some cycles, maybe liquidity cycles available in the market, where a lot of money is moving around and is trying to find a place where park it, and people put it in Bitcoin. Then the price is being pushed up, and there be always sellers. There be always somebody willing to sell their Bitcoin for some price at a certain point, up to a certain point, because you see, I was showing you before the graph of the overall trend, in particular for the people that maybe didn't watch our first meeting. When you plot it in the log graph, it looks like this, and it very clearly shows the general path. That is the support line, that is a power law, and then the deviations from it, that are the bubbles. And you see what happens every single time we go back to the general trend. It is pretty amazing and incredible pattern that Bitcoin has, this kind of memory that knows where to go back to. And so the bubbles represent these deviations, and supposedly somebody is not willing, to pay too high of a price, because when we reach a peak, when people start to sell like crazy, the market is liquid and needs to be liquid, because otherwise Bitcoin will not be valuable. So this idea, and I look at others, like for example, there was this model, this contending model, but by the way, it was inspired by the power law, because I think the creator of this model is called Plan B, and he created this model that is called stock to flow, and it was the most popular model last cycle. When right now we are in the new cycle. The bull run, supposedly from my predictions, will start in November. when we will reach a peak. And so the previous cycle 4 years ago, this model was extremely popular. Everybody was talking about, even large financial companies like Fidelity, etc. And it was all based on this idea of scarcity. So basically, it was making a claim that the halving process, that is this basically deflationary component of Bitcoin that is programming the code, where every 4 years, instead of printing more Bitcoin, we print less, right? It's not really printing, it's a code. There are protocols, through the mining of Bitcoin. But basically, the rewards of many Bitcoin you receive by solving some of these cryptography puzzles, it's reduced by 2 every 4 years. And this analyst made a claim that this process of reducing by 2 the coins creates some kind of a supply shock, because all of a sudden there are less coins produced. And that is actually what causes the bubble. And that actually, his claim in general is that actually what pushes the price up, even not just in the bubble, but in general. And it's all garbage. It's just garbage, because, maybe we can go a little bit in the detail, but to give you an introduction, is the best case, one of the worst cases, I should say, of correlation does imply causation. And this is a graph to show that. And sometimes I have hard time to explain this to the general public, because as a science communicator, I'm also trying to go a little bit in the detail, because a lot of science communicators talk about the general idea and they kind of avoid graphs or technical terms or even equations, because you lose a lot of people doing that. Many people don't know how to read charts. They don't understand how to, even charts that they find on a newspaper or website, they don't know how to interpret them. And it's a little challenging, right? In fact, in a moment I will stop. I want to know what your approach to that is, because like being transhumanist, sometimes we try to actually communicate science ideas to the public, and there is a challenge there, right, in trying to explain graphs. Kurzweil does a very good job, right? By the way, Kurzweil was one of my inspirations in making these graphs, in trying to understand patterns and future predictions and things like that. But in this graph, you can see, for example, right, so I have the issuance of the coins on the x-axis, and I have a price on the y-axis. And you can see 4 clusters, right? And these are the cycles. And what happens is, because the issuance is the production of a coin, so as we move from the right to the left, you have less and less coin produced. This is how this graph should be interpreted. And the price goes up, right? So you can see immediately by a glance, and anybody that has experience with data can immediately recognize the significance of this graph, is that there is no real correlation. We have blobs. Whenever you have blobs, it means no correlation between the 2 quantities. And you will see it, you think there is a general trend, because the blobs go up and the price goes up, so you think they are correlated. So one causes the other, right? The reduction in issuance causes the price to go up. But it's BS, because what happened, it's programmatic. So every 4 years, so the price, if you look at one single blob, and they made like a little animation online on my YouTube channel where I plot 1 dot at a time, or I color the dots in red to see all the, how time plays in this data. And what will you see is the price moving left to right, left to right, left to right. That means it's not influenced by issuance. And within a block, sometime we have a change in issuance, because what happens, right? Just to explain a little bit how Bitcoin works, there is almost like a thermostat mechanism. It's called the difficulty adjustment. So in theory, it should take 10 minutes to solve these blocks, right? These are problems, mathematical problems that the mining machines trying to solve, and these are solving the problem is linked with validating the transactions in the network. And when you do that, you get a reward, right? In the beginning, it was 50 Bitcoin. It's not one single person or computer that's trying to resolve these problems. Many times, computers come together in what are called pools. So there are all these resources, computational resources, trying to solve the problem, and then whoever does it first, these pools, they are competing pools around the world, gets the reward, right? And the idea is that it should take about 10 minutes to do it, given the known computational resources at the time. And if it takes longer or shorter, there is an adjustment. This adjustment happens though every 2 weeks. So it takes a little bit of time for the system to adjust. So in the meanwhile, there is some uncertainty because there are new machines coming in the system, bringing more computational power, and so that could push the value up. Making more coins because there is more computational power in a given day. Every dot here represents a day. Every dot is 1 day. 1 day in terms of how many coins were produced and what was the price for that day. And you can see that it's a cloud. If you focus on the first little blob, and the first little blob is before we had the halving, this event where the rewards get cut in half. So that was before that. So the reward was about 50 coins per block. And the variability within that period was so big that sometimes we produced 5,000 coins, other days we produce 15,000 coins, so almost 3 times more. And you can see the price in one of these areas where there is a lot of variability in the production stays flat, right? And because you can see there are basically you can draw almost like parallel lines where there are many values of issuance, but one single value of price. So that means there is not really a correlation. And the video that I made shows it clearly because the price is going up, and we know why it goes up, because people joining the network, that has nothing to do with scarcity. It's just simply wanting to join this network, and the price goes up, and the amount of coin produced, it's irrelevant because of a price moves back and forth like that. So it's a not influence. Even if sometimes you produce 3 times more coins, and sometimes 3 times less coins. And by the time it arrives here, and we are ready for the jump, the price is already there. And then as everything shifts it to the left, the price also shifts to the left. So it's not that it's the shifting to the left, and so it looks like the price is moving up and it's jumping up. It's an illusion. It's just an illusion. The price is already there, and it's simply shifting to the left when this reduction in rewards happens. Okay, and so it looks to our eyes there is a significant correlation, but it's an illusion. And this entire model that was the rage few years ago, and it still exists in people. This influencer has 2 million people following him. That is crazy to me as a scientist. Having people following fake data, it's really insulting, and it makes me upset because I would like more people understanding science, and because the science is like Bitcoin. We have this kind of slogan that says, do not trust, verify. You should never trust people telling you stuff. You should go and look at the data, verify yourself, right? And with science, we can do that, even if it takes a little bit of time. And nowadays, with ChatGPT and AI, everybody can download the data and ask ChatGPT to create a graph like that. It's not very difficult. And they see that is amazing. One of a good application of AI. Many more and more people are trying actually to do that. Even people, the other day I was talking with a cook that actually was producing graph like this, but he was a curious cook. They wanted to know and understand, and he could produce graph, and he was trying to make sense of that, because that is the beauty of science, to actually verify yourself. And you can see, you can go deeper in this graph, but basically this graph shows this correlation between this reduction in production of the coins and the price. It's spurious. It's completely inexistent. I did it for fun. I did it with noise, and then I just use noise, no production of coin. I just produce artificial noise, and then I reduce the production of coin at arbitrary time. It doesn't have to be the precise time when the historical reduction in coin happens. You can do it randomly. In fact, you can do it every year. You can do it every 2 years. You can do it how much you want, and then you can do it by an arbitrary amount, not just 2. You can do it 1.3, 2.1. You can choose any arbitrary amount, and you will get something like this. And then you can make a model of Bitcoin price based on this, and it will look momentarily nice because you are overfitting the data. You're trying to draw this arbitrary line through the data, and it will look good and will fool many people. And it's not a good model of Bitcoin because it's fake. I did it with soccer prices. With the World Cup, I went to look at the World Cup prices every 4 years because they happen every 4 years. And I even used the date of the final World Cup game, and I use that as my amount of jumping. And I can also make a model out of that, right? So it's garbage. And so anytime I find something like this where people say there is a reduction of that, there is a reduction of this, there is some scarcity here, there is some scarcity here, I cannot find a real explanation. There is no explanatory power behind the data. And I am so shocked that people don't see that. It's like very few people go and actually look at the data in this level of details. And so the question is, if it is not scarcity, then what it is, right? Because the question had the 2 parts. First of all, I'm trying to say there is no evidence for that there is anything that we can relate to scarcity. In fact, it's a challenge, I say all the time to any analyst. Show me something that is really, truly correlated with scarcity that pushes price, because the data should be there to show that this is the case. And nobody has done that so far. Nobody. And so what is? Well, it's this idea of getting involved in a network, right? And so people join because they see some value. And for sure, the finite cap is one of a value proposition. They think my money will not be diluted by an arbitrary third party. So I'm sure that a lot of people are motivated by that. It's not controlled by the government. And the fact that, it's very easy to move the money from one place to another. There are a lot of long list of all these wonderful properties of Bitcoin that remind us gold, because, it's not because it's rare, it's because it's finite, that is important. It cannot be diluted, but at the same time it's fungible because like with gold, you can have small little coins. I have actually a coin sitting on my desk from ancient Byzantium. I cannot, I don't want to spend $10,000 in a Roman coin, real Roman coin, ancient Roman coin, because this is what these coins are. So I got one from Byzantium that is more affordable, but it's still beautiful gold coin from ancient times. And, it's very, very small, very tiny. And it's a small little piece of gold, and it was valuable. You can do a lot of things with that little coin. And so you can do the same thing with Bitcoin. You can have how much Bitcoin you want. So the idea is that people want to switch, right? We leave behind this old system of thinking, of relating to money and value. And right now, the main function of Bitcoin is not the only function, but the main function at this particular point is that they are transferring the value of, for example, their retirement funds, their saving. They are transferring to this system, this new system. And this is why with time, the value goes up. And all the network research that we did show that is the case, because I told you before, I did all these studies showing the network property of Bitcoin. In particular, so I found some articles showing that all social networks, both the nodes and the links of the social networks, grow as power laws. And this is one of the articles. There are many, but this is one of them. This is from this Chinese group. I think we discussed this graph before, but basically they were looking at different cases. The reason why they introduced Enron was to show actually a network that failed. And so what can happen if a power law fails? So you can see, because of the bankruptcy, all these data points are falling down. So it's a broken power law. But all the others are very nice power laws. And this is the relationship between the links and the nodes. The links for us is the price, because the price is proportional to the number of links according to the Metcalfe law. And so, the network is growing according to the Metcalfe law. The number of links that is proportional to some kind of power of in theory should be 2, but it could be slightly different. But you square the number of people involved or activity in the network, and that should give you the price. And so you see, it's a nonlinear process where more and more people join, and more valuable the network is. So it's not, and here made an illustration of that, where we started with Satoshi. He involved more people below him, among them Al. By the way, so you see, was a runner like you, Gennady. They put huge big legs, because if you ever saw these pictures of Al, he had like huge, enormous legs, very fit runner. And so, this Al, that was one of us, right? He was a transhumanist, and then few people below him, and then more and more people joining the network. By the way, the formula that shows how the network grows, and that is actually at the core of what power laws are, is that the change here in Bitcoiners. I'm making this simplification where I say the Bitcoiners are proportional to the number of addresses, right? So it's the addresses. I'm trying to highlight that the addresses are a measure, indirect measure. It's a proxy of how many people are joining the network. It's what we have. It's what is available, because there is nowhere a place where people sign their names, thank God, right? Because it gives us some level of anonymity, where you write the name of you joining the network, right? All we have is this indirect measure called the addresses. But it's okay, because in science many times we have proxies for things. But it should be a proportion to the number of Bitcoiners. And that change in Bitcoiners, and I like the idea of Bitcoiners because, we can associate with people and it's more clear in our mind. The change every day in number of Bitcoin, it can be done at every level, but let's use days because it's a simple thing. The change every day in the number of Bitcoins, it's proportional to the number of Bitcoiners. That is the key element. It's an iteration over and over and over again. Basically, the change is proportional to the state of a system at any particular time. And the factor of 3 comes from our observation, our data. If you look actually at how the address is changing time, it's a power law with 3. The slope is 3. The power is 3. And if you write down an equation that describes the change, will be 3 divided by the time, that is the essential thing that makes it different from an exponential, because if we didn't have a time and we multiply every time by 3, we will get an exponential growth. But because of that curbing factor, that is the age of a system, so as the system ages, this change becomes less. And then it iterates itself, right? You will add this change to the number of Bitcoiners, so that will update the state of a system. You will get more Bitcoiners, and then you iterate this. You could do it in a for loop. And they did it. In fact, they did it. And what you get? You get exactly the power law. So it's another way of showing that the system is a power law. It's a power law both in terms of the number of links that are, the number of nodes that are growing with the power of 3 in time. And by the way, there is a lot of research to show that viruses spread with that. Like I mentioned, I think last time, that AIDS spread exactly with the power of 3, strangely enough. And then the value, because of the Metcalfe law, that basically say the number of links should be proportional to some kind of a power of a number of nodes. Theoretically, that number, if everybody is connected with everybody else, that number is 2. And so the value, because we're talking about value, right? The value should be proportional to the number of links, and therefore to the number of nodes, so the Bitcoiners, because in the network, every individual is a node in the network, to the square. So it's a non-linear process that grows up very fast. So this shows the growth. Here, I kind of broke it down in terms of this curbing factor, right? So we started with 3 the first day, Satoshi, and we went to 3. If you apply this formula, then it was 6 and 10, 15. This is the change, and you can go through these. And at a certain point, generally, we can make these slides available. I can put it in a website so people can download them and look at them and go a little bit deeper. But so that is the idea. This is what gives value. Now, the question is, why the other coins cannot follow these, because they could also be understood as social networks. And it could be another coin that actually substitutes Bitcoin, right? Sorry, it's taking so long, but that's such an important question that I want to break it down in all its elements. Why the other coins do not follow this? There is a word for that. It's called the network effect. Once you have a first mover and people start to join the system, and this system has even a slight advantage relatively to the other one, it becomes the dominant one. So it's not that there are no other coins. There are many. But Bitcoin, there is not another coin that even close comes up with the value of Bitcoin. Like a Bitcoin is $60,000. The second one is much less than that. And the other coins, they tend to follow Bitcoin, but not closely enough where they have this beautiful power law behavior, is because I think the effects of a network are so strong. Probably you need to reach a critical value. It's something that needs to be understood better, right? Because you can ask all these questions, and having a scientific framework allows you to actually go deeper and start to answer these questions in a more, instead of making up stories, you actually can come up with numbers and graphs and data show, okay, this is what happened after you reach a certain critical value. The system tends to be a power law. And I think this is what happened. But right now, I don't have, I have to be coherent. I don't have one piece of data that tells you, or a graph that tells you, see, this is what happens, right? But it could be studied. We could look at all the other systems and do it a systematic study and see, what is missing from the other systems. You can see already, I don't know how many other coins we have 22,000 people showing up for a conference, for example. There is a lot of passion. There is a lot of, I will not call it faith, but conviction. People are very enthusiastic about Bitcoin, and they hold the coin. They see value in Bitcoin. All these things are all amplifying these network effects. And the energy that is put in the system. There are not many coins where literally millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars are invested in the infrastructure, the mining machines. Right now, some of these operations are in the order of tens of millions or even more in terms of what is needed to invest to mine these coins. All that is not present in everything else. And I made an analogy in my head, and I would like to share it with you. To me, it's almost like, when during biology, during the evolution of the biological forms, of a unicellular organism decided, quote unquote, to join forces and became a multicellular organism. Once you make a decision like that, if you leave a system, imagine your liver cells deciding, I'm going to quit the system and I'm going away. I'm going to make my own life, independent life. What do you think will happen to these liver cells? They will die, right? They cannot do it. And so it's a system where if the value of a system is to be in the system, you cannot really leave it. I mean, sure, there are some people that can leave Bitcoin, they can sell their Bitcoin, not being the part, but you cannot have everybody doing that, because that will make the price collapse. Everybody will lose all the value they put in. So that keeps the system alive, and it's impossible to jump ship. Like you can do that with Facebook. It's already difficult to do it because a lot of your friends are there, a lot of your connections are there. For a long time, people were saying it will be very difficult to create a competitor for Facebook. But, then people migrated to X. Right now, it looks like Facebook, at least in the US, it seems that it's almost dead. Right? Nobody almost uses it anymore. But everybody's using Twitter. But you cannot do with the system like this. Like if you do it and you do it quickly enough, everything will die and you will lose your value. You will not be able to transfer it to the other system. While if it is only about using the system for some practical purpose, you can, right? Because if the other system is there and is functional, you can transfer there. While with something like this, you will die. And so it's a system that once it's created, it's basically mortal. I think it will be very, very difficult to kill it because people identify with the system itself, right? They put their value there and the value is in the system. It's something that needs to be understood better. But I think this is what happens. And the only thing we can do is actually grow and actually bring in all the value from outside. It's like a black hole. It's it continues this growth, this very sustainable, this very precise growth over time. And until basically, I think, the Bitcoiners, the most extreme Bitcoiners that think that one day the entire world will use Bitcoin as a financial system are right. They are correct. Where that is going to happen, we can discuss if we talk about the future of Bitcoin, where it's going, how long it's going to take. So they call that event hyper-Bitcoinization. And so the value will go from being a store of value where everybody basically is kind of like investing in this new infrastructure. Then there will be a point where everybody's using it, to do all the things we do with money. That event is going to happen in the future. So anyway, sorry if it took so long to answer this simple question, supposedly simple question, but hopefully I cover all the aspects of it, or at least I think the majority of it. I'll let you guys comment on these or ask further question. Apologies for the long monologue.
Yes, well, thank you for that very thorough answer. And the essence of your answer is there's a very strong network effect with Bitcoin that incentivizes people to join and disincentivizes people from leaving. So it's not per se the technical protocol of Bitcoin, because there have been forks of Bitcoin that are very similar in nature. For instance, Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold. And if you look at the prices historically of Bitcoin Cash for example, or Bitcoin Gold, there have been some cyclical behaviors, but they're not anything that could be characterized as following power law. There hasn't been that support line that you mentioned, Giovanni. And also, Litecoin was designed to essentially be like the Bitcoin protocol, but more efficient. And yet, if you purchased Litecoin, say, 10 years ago, you might have doubled your holdings in terms of the US dollar value, with some significant bubbles in between. But again, there wouldn't be anything similar to a power law. The closest in terms of the price patterns that I could find that might follow something like this kind of growth is Ethereum. But even Ethereum has had some wilder price swings, relatively speaking. And I'm still not sure that Ethereum would follow a power law, even though Ethereum has a lot to recommend itself in terms of the functionality, for instance, of smart contracts and tokens that can be built on the Ethereum blockchain. So I'm wondering, do you think there's anything that could lead to this kind of network shift that you mentioned, in terms of people deciding there's something, some cryptocurrency that is just so much more powerful, so much more effective than Bitcoin, that they will switch to it? Clearly, a clone of Bitcoin or a more efficient protocol that's conceptually similar to Bitcoin won't quite achieve that. But could there be something else that's just much more functional and is still a cryptocurrency that could achieve it?
Yeah, for sure it's not Ethereum, because Ethereum has a lot of problems. One of the problems, they just switched their protocol to be proof of stake instead of proof of work. And proof of work is an essential feature, because you do want to link your network with the production of energy, the use of energy, the fact that energy is invested, because basically it anchors the value of Bitcoin to something physical, that is how much energy it takes to produce one Bitcoin. And that is actually something that is similar in that case to gold, in the sense that, gold, it's not just a question of rarity, it's also a question of its link, because it's difficult to extract because it's rare. But it takes energy, time, and effort and investment to extract gold now more than in the past. And same thing with Bitcoin. Once you take out that very important concept, you are, doing something else. You're creating, and sure, Ethereum can have all this functionality and people find it interesting, but it becomes more like a technology. It becomes something that people can use and do things with it, but it loses a lot of these network properties. And really, for the network properties, you don't really need something that is super sophisticated. Actually, something that works and works fine, it has all what you need. If you think about money has been a very simple type of technology for a long time. When we were coins, it was just a little piece of metal. When we started to go to banknotes, it was just a little piece of paper, and it has been like that for hundreds and hundreds of years. It didn't need to improve, because it did exactly what it needed to do, and it did it well. Maybe there was a little bit of a new technology in counterfeit, avoiding counterfeiting, because they started to put holograms and other things that made it more difficult to counterfeit the banknotes, or they made it less easy to be destroyed with paper, better paper or whatever. But in general, it remained very simple as technology. So money doesn't have to be complicated. Yes, you can do other things that can be used in finance that have other function, like contracts and things like that. And this is what Ethereum is supposed to be. I am okay with it. I actually did analyze Ethereum, and it's not a power law. It doesn't, like, you can fit it as if it was a power law, but one of the measures that we use to determine how good of a fit we have is this R square. With Bitcoin, it's 0.95. With Ethereum, it's 0.65. That you will see is basically, and that 0.65 is mostly because it tends to follow Bitcoin, but it doesn't even do a good job in following Bitcoin, because otherwise it will be a power law, and it is not, and so it's actually evidence that there is something special about Bitcoin that is not found in the other coins, and so the technology needed is simple. Now the main issue is the day that we want to use it as more than a store of value, that this is why people hold it, because they think that one day there will be some use case, like maybe being the settlement layer where all the transactions in the world are settled. That is what people see as or envision to be Bitcoin to be the ultimate role for Bitcoin, something that can be used internationally, that is relatively fast. But people are, that has some technical limitations, and people have had wars about it. Right, a few years ago there was this block war that kind of almost split the community in two. It can't actually did it, but one side won versus the other, and it was all about the fungibility of Bitcoin in terms of how easy it could be in terms of being transferred from one person to another, and how fast and the many transactions it can handle. And that issue right now is trying to be solved by creating layers, different layers on top of Bitcoin that are faster, they have a better functionality, but they are built on Bitcoin itself. And Bitcoin then it becomes the ultimate layers where all these transactions are settled, right? So you can transfer money very quickly from one person to another using, for example, what is called the Lightning network. And then even if it takes longer to settle the transaction, it's okay, because it can be done a little bit later. Even if it takes several minutes, it's fine, because you already done the first transfer. And like with your bank account, right? You use your card, your debit card. It's not that somebody is already doing all the calculations and settling these in your bank account. That happens during the business day, but at night when you buy some food or whatever, you can still transfer money pretty quickly, and so it will work very, very similarly to that, but without a third party, without using a third party. And so people are trying to resolve that anyway by building these layers, right, on top of Bitcoin. So it can have all that functionality without changing the underlying technology. In fact, with the underlying technology, it's simple, maybe even outdated in a sense. It's actually a feature and not a bug, because it's simple, less things can go wrong, people can understand it better, and so it's actually makes it stronger. So it doesn't really need to be changed or improved, and people realize that, and this is why it's very difficult, if not impossible, at this point, given it's $1 trillion asset, and it's moving. Many people say, and this maybe links to the other question, the future of Bitcoin, right? So another thing that people say all the time, because I'm trying to change the way people think about Bitcoin, they say, "Oh, we are early home." They are saying we still need to, because it's still a relatively small number of people that are using Bitcoin even as a store of value. Probably because we have this proxy that are addresses. It leaves a little bit of interpretation how to go from the addresses to the number of Bitcoiners, and that number can change a little bit by a factor of few. But right now, maybe conservative estimates are like on the order of 100 million people. That is a relatively small number relatively to the world population, right? So many people think, well, we have a lot ahead of us if we want to orange peel the entire world. But you don't need to orange peel the entire world to actually to arrive to this event that we call hyper-Bitcoinization. But maybe we can discuss a little bit. It's very difficult to envision hyper-Bitcoinization. It's a little bit almost like the singularity of money. Once that happens, it's almost impossible to think what will be that world, right? Like with the technological singularity, what will be the world after the technological singularity? I have no clue. And it's very difficult to understand what will happen once some large nations adopts Bitcoin and say, we are going to peg the yen or the dollar to Bitcoin. How that world will look like, or even do without all the nations start to use Bitcoin, if that event happens. But how long will it take to arrive there? I think by the time Bitcoin reaches a market cap of $100 trillion, that is kind of close to all the value on earth. We're talking about all the real estate, and maybe Gennady, you're a little bit more knowledgeable, right? Because you have an accounting background, if I remember well, right? Maybe, yeah, is that true?
It's an actuarial background, so it's a little bit different. But I have studied some accounting. I'm just not an accountant.
Right. Is it correct that the entire world real estate on the order of a few $100 trillion, right? Hundreds of trillions of dollars, $200 trillion, something on that order, right? And so by the time Bitcoin reaches that, then large nations will have to deal with Bitcoin in a very direct way, where they cannot ignore it, and probably they need to accept that is the point of reference in terms of holding a large chunk of the wealth of the world, And so what else can they do if not adopting it? There's a little bit what happened with these financial institutions where they ignore Bitcoin for a long, long time and even insulted it and dismissed it. And now this large corporation like BlackRock, that is one of the, they manage $1 trillion in assets, they capitulated and they simply incorporated in their financial model, right? They have now ETFs that they are actually going around the world saying, oh, you should invest in Bitcoin. This is BlackRock, one of the most, like a kind of point of reference for institutional money. This is what they are doing exactly right now. There are videos showing them lecturing investors about how they should actually invest in Bitcoin. They created these ETFs, and they are buying billions and billions worth of Bitcoin, and they are actually creating investment plans, retirement plans, because this is one of the things they do. Where a small right now, but a significant component of their retirement plan is Bitcoin. But if I told you this, like even 5 years ago, you will have laughed. You will have thought that this will probably never happen, but it's happening. And so it will happen the same thing when nations will adopt Bitcoin. And when that is going to happen, when $100 trillion, first, okay, right now we are 1 trillion, when 10 trillion is going to happen. Well, according to the power law, basically a rough estimate that you can use kind of in your head almost is the fact that if you double the time because of this power of 6, right? Remember, we're going up with the power of 6. That is, it's 5.8 or something that is close to 6. So if you extrapolate this, the value, right, using this formula, and we can even, you were very good last time, Gennady, with the formula. So we could calculate the value of Bitcoin and then multiply by 20 million, so that will give us a market cap in 20 years from now, right? So for example, right now, use 20 years. So multiply. Why don't you do that for me, if you don't mind? So let's take 20. Let's multiply that by 365, and we get 7,300. Right. So that will be the value of Bitcoin in 5 years from now, because that will be 20 years total. That number represents the number of years total in the system. So let's use that number to calculate the value of Bitcoin 5 years from now. That will be the reference values, not even the value in one of these bubbles. So what do we get?
So let's see. You want to calculate the value 5 years from now. So
that will be 20 years total from the Genesis block, because that days represent the total number from the start, right? 2009. So if I take 20 and then multiply by 365, that is the number of days in a year, I get 7,300. So let's substitute there for days 7,300. So take the power of that to the 5.3, right? I can do that with you. So I take the power of 5.83, and then we multiply by 10 to the minus 17, right? Like we did last time.
Yes.
And what we get is close to, go ahead.
333,558.
Correct. So now let's go to 30. That will be 15 years from now, because Bitcoin has existed for 15 years. 30 will be the total. And now we get what?
So now that's going to be just a moment.
Yeah.
So that's going to be $3,546,372.
Yeah, and then we multiply that by the total number of Bitcoins, and we get something close to $10 billion. In fact, trillions. So we get $70 trillion, right? If we multiply that by the numbers of Bitcoins that are 21 millions. So we get 70 trillions. Like I get 7.4 times 10 to the 13, that is 70 trillion. And so if you go, let's say, 32 years or 35 years, then that numbers, it's close to 180 trillions. Okay. So in something close to 20 years from now, because it's 35 years total, and we have Bitcoin has existed for 15, we are going close to 180 trillions, right? So by that time, but it's not very far from us, 20 years, and you continue on this path, Bitcoin will be more than $100 trillion in terms of market cap. And at that time, I think nations will pay attention. They already pay attention. It's in their radar for sure. But by the time we reach the entire value of real estate in the world, something is going to give, right? So what will be that give? Many Bitcoiners think Bitcoin is going to be the monetary standard of the world. Now, in terms of adoption, that doesn't mean the entire population of the world, because we're talking about something. I can tell you what that means in terms of many people by the time will have been have bought Bitcoin or interacted directly. Because one other way of doing it is using the 35, you divide it by 15, because you can take the ratio of that number. So 35 years divided by 15, that is the number of years that exist. And we say that adoption, differently from the price, grows with the cube. So that is only 12 times more. And if you multiply by that 100 million, we are talking about a little bit more than a billion people. So we don't have to orange peel the entire population of the world. It just needs a critical mass. And then the price, because it's a square, is the square of a number of users, is what really will change everything, because the value in it is so big that the world needs to pay attention. Now, what exactly will happen, how will happen, if something happens before that, that will stop Bitcoin, I don't know. I don't think they can do anything with it. The regulation wise, they tried. It's unstoppable. I don't think, unless there is some disastrous event like a nuclear war or something, I don't think it's stoppable. And so we are talking about, when people say we are early, well, we are talking about 20 years from now. And if you think in terms of scales, right? If you're thinking about that, they say that is the key to understand Bitcoin, is understanding the scaling properties. Bitcoin went through 8 orders of magnitude. We are talking about 2 orders of magnitude away. So in terms of scales, we are almost like 85% there. So we are not early. We are very close to the goal. It's like the same thing that people don't realize about technology, that is moving so fast that they think, it's going to take hundreds of years or thousands of years before we have a singularity, but the singularity is close, because progress is moving so fast that we don't realize the next 20 years everything will change. That is the other thing, that when people try to tell me, oh, can you project it to 30 years, 40 years? I think it's nonsense, because by the time, first of all, we are talking about then valuations that go beyond the entire value of the world. And also, we have a singularity to deal with. I say all the time, don't ask me to go beyond the date for the singularity, because I don't know even how the world will look like at that time. And at this point, we should not trust anybody, but I think Kurzweil did a very good job in projecting these dates, because he has been right so far, in terms of how fast technology is moving. And so, that is what I'm thinking about this. Now, will AI use Bitcoin once the singularity is there? I don't know. It's possible, but I don't know. It's like so difficult to understand how the world will look like beyond the singularity. But right now, we have 20 years in front of us where I think Bitcoin will continue to go up in value, will follow the power law. It's unstoppable. There is no contender, and that is what is going to happen. Beyond that, I'm not sure, and I have to be honest about that.
Yes. So you have a model that you think will work in describing the price of Bitcoin for the next 20 years or so. My next question is, what happens if everybody in the Bitcoin world, and maybe a lot of people who are not currently holders of Bitcoin, actually come to agree with you and set their expectations accordingly? Because, of course, market prices adjust according to expectations, and there are a lot of conventional financial analysis frameworks that kind of rely on this, the efficient market hypothesis. One could question whether or not it's correct, because people could be misled in their expectations, and that's how bubbles form. But what happens if people form an expectation, and a strong expectation, that agrees with the Bitcoin power law theory? How would that affect the prices of Bitcoin? Would you expect the prices of Bitcoin to rise to a level that's commensurate with the Bitcoin power law theory and stay there? Or would you expect maybe even there to be a bubble as people anticipate where the price of Bitcoin according to the power law might be, say, in a few years from now?
So, okay, again, this is one of these things that, if it was fully coherent, I will say, I don't know, and give me a little time. I'm going to study it, and I'm going to find out, right? Because this is a real answer that we should give when we don't know stuff well enough. But if I had to make an hypothesis, I will say that my knowledge of this type of system is that they tend to self-reinforce. And awareness actually probably is going to make it even stronger because, if anything, it coordinates the behavior even more. And given that we just said it's all about iteration loops, that will make the iteration loop even stronger, if anything. Now, the other component is we do have the bubbles, and the bubble probably are like almost like a escape valve, when things maybe don't like, when the system it's influenced by external forces and it needs to do something else. We didn't discuss why we have the bubbles, even if it's not due to these supply shocks. It's mostly a combination of Moore's law. The miners needs to. And in fact, I saw one of the questions from the audience talking about the rewards of the miners. Turns out, if you go through the calculation, and I wrote these, maybe people should read my article. It's actually the corollary. It's a corollary of a theory, because in one end, the theory says there are no bubbles because the bubble cancel each other. You go up and then we go back to the power law. In the other, they do exist and they need to be described and acknowledged. And the corollary of a theory describe why we have the bubbles, and they go through this reasoning that has to do with the Moore's law. And so, to make it very short, it's if there was no the halving, because of the Moore's law, the mining machines will become more efficient, and they will get an advantage because by using the same amount of energy, they are more efficient, and so they will be able to mine more. And that is kind of defeating the purpose, because the entire idea is to do this proof of work and to keep the proof of work kind of on the edge of profitability, because we want to give rewards to the miners, but not large enough where basically they start not to do the work they need to do, right? So they need to do the right amount of work. And it turns out, if you go through, it's kind of I did a better simulation because I did a lot of simulation, a lot of work, but I'm giving one of these kind of back on the envelope calculations where if you look at what happens, right, with the halving, we have this relationship between hash rate and price, which is hash rate equal price square. Every 4 years, the mining machines have an improvement by a factor of 4. This relationship between hash rate and price still gives you an advantage because even if the price needed is square because of the Moore's law, so you get a factor of 2. So every 4 years, basically the miners will be more efficient by a factor of 2. And then the halving comes and kills that factor of 2. So the result is that the miners are not penalized, neither incentivized to mine more by the halving. It's a neutral event for them, with the caveat that they need to invest in the infrastructure. They need to buy new machines. They need to keep up. They need to have this Moore's law effect to compensate for the halving. If they do, then they stay in equilibrium, they stay in balance. And that is good for the system, because it's good that every 4 years there is this incrementing the security. There are better machines, and that brings the security higher. There is more energy consumed, and that actually is an investment in the system. And with this investment, it's almost like you're seeing all these buildings being built in the city, and this new city, and there are new bridges, new schools, and you want to join the party, right? You want to kind of going where all the cool things are happening, and this creates this kind of punctuated evolution almost, right? There are these events where something happens that is very fast and everybody joins, and then kind of settles down and it goes to the general trend. So it doesn't have to do with scarcity. It has this, again, with activity, with euphoria, with enthusiasm, and there is a lot of investment happening during the time. Plus some let's say, cultural, social events. People have expectation, almost like it's a Christmas, the equivalent of Christmas for Bitcoin. People are changing their behavior because there is this event that happens, associated with the path of the Earth around the sun. So the same thing happens with Bitcoin. But we have these bubbles, and they are kind of like an escape valve for crazy behavior, like with exponential growth, right? I say, hey, Bitcoin once in a while tries and say, hey, let me be exponential, and it goes crazy. It goes to Cancun. It has fun. It drinks with his friends, and then it comes back home, right? It comes back to the power law. So it's a way of allowing for this exponential behavior to happen, going away from the pattern, but then he wants to go to the pattern. So you could have local events that can change the price of Bitcoin, but this tendency of being scale invariant is very, very powerful. Once a system becomes scale invariant, it's very difficult to push it away from it. Because it's basically, it says that these iterative processes that are happening at all the levels, all the different levels of Bitcoin, it's almost like, when you have a mosaic that is very difficult to break because it's made of smaller pieces, and the pieces interact together to make bigger pieces. It kind of distributes the stress in the system. So you will have an ancient Roman mosaic that survives even if a building is completely destroyed, right? Everything else around it is gone, and what you find is only the mosaic, because they can resist earthquakes, they can resist corrosion. They because of it's kind of almost like a fractal if you look at it, right? It has many different layers at different levels. And this property of Bitcoin being scale invariant, I try to test it many different ways. I want to show you some of the graphs to show you how that is true. So beyond the line that I show, I try to go deeper, and I did many different tests of scale invariance that to me it's the most powerful and interesting property. And this is why I don't think anything can really change it. They can try, but they will not be able to achieve it. And by the way, another way of answering your question is this one. This is the graph that I wanted to show you, but you are aware of all this work that has been done by Jeffrey West, for example, that studied cities and so on, right? So it turns out the number of gas stations in a city are power laws. The number of patents in a city are a power law. How fast somebody walks in a city is a power law. The number of crimes. So do you think there is a committee that comes together in a city and say, guys, we don't have enough gas station here. Let's change that, right? Because we need to follow these power laws. And, our power law committee told us the gas stations are not following in this city a power law. So we need more, we need less, etc. Oh, they come together and say, no, we need to resist this idea that a gas station follow a power law. Let's make more gas station. It doesn't happen. Right? It doesn't matter what people believe. Or you go and live in a city and say, you know what? I don't like this idea that people are ruled by laws, math. I'm going to walk much slower. Okay, you're going to do that. Okay, maybe you create a club of slow walkers in the city. Good luck, right? There is a reason why people walk at a certain speed in a city, and that follows a power law. Maybe you can convince few people to do something different and do silly walks or something, but it will be a limited group, right? It's not going to change the overall behavior because these things are bigger than us. And so I know that this is not something that a finance person will like because they like this idea of market efficiency, etc. But it doesn't work with Bitcoin. In particular, if you look at the overall pattern, right? Maybe on a daily level, on the transactions that we have on the market, it's very stochastic. In fact, this graph shows you that. So what did they do? How do I create what this graph represents? This funny graph. So what I'm doing here, I'm sampling the Bitcoin price randomly. So I pick two dates, like day number 1000 and day 500. It doesn't have to be this precise relationship. I'm using two simple days, but it could be anything, 1,233 and 329. So you pick randomly two days, and the computer is very good in doing these random numbers. And then you take the ratio of these two numbers. And then you calculate the log. That gives you some kind of a scale of the change in time relatively to the start, because scale is the log, right? And the ratio is the ratio between these 2 days. So it gives you a measure of how big the second day is relatively to the first day, the change in time. So in fact, it could be considered the holding time, right? How much you're holding. So let's say you bought Bitcoin in day 500, and then you are selling it in day 1,000. And that ratio represents how long you hold, right? Relatively to another person that maybe holds 2 times longer. So he sell it at day, 4 times longer. I say if this person sell it at day 2000, relatively to 500, it will be 4 times or 2 times longer than you. So you understand how this works. You pick 2 days, and then you're looking at this ratio, you're taking the log, and this is what we have in the x-axis, this quantity. And then you compare it with the change in price. So basically the return. So price in day 2, right, 1,000 day versus price at day 1, day 500. So you're looking at this change in price, the ratio of this change in price. You follow me? And then you take the log of that. And I allow also for the day 2 to be smaller. It's not meaningful, but it's kind of a way of going back in time, so you can look in both directions. This is why this graph is kind of symmetric in the middle, right? So in that case, the day 10 to the 0 means 1. So if you move on the left of that 10 to the 0, you are getting the times where day 2 is smaller than day 1. It's kind of, in that case, it's, you're going back in time. But I wanted to see if it was symmetric, and it is, right? But now do this over and over and over again, and this is what you get. You see how the power law comes out naturally from this, right? That shows that in average, yes, there will be some variability. So if Bitcoin was a perfect power law, if it was like just a theoretical power law, this exercise will give you the red line. Everything will be on top of the red line. There will be no fuzziness. But we have fuzziness because, after all, we are dealing with a stochastic system. We are dealing with a random system. But in average, the system follows this deterministic pattern that is the power law. So this is an independent test of the scaling property of Bitcoin that are true in average. You see? You understand how this graph works? It's a very cool way of showing this scaling property of Bitcoin, and now it's a kind of a mixture between the deterministic property, after all, an equation, right? Following the equation, and the fact that you have randomness. So you do have randomness, but just locally. But overall, it follows a power law. And I did this test where I tried with other systems, like, for example, the SP500. If you are curious to see how this will look like with the SP500, you want to look at this graph. So this graph, what I'm showing here, let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. I did exactly the same procedure, and you can see the Bitcoin. So here is the theory. The theory, I took like a theoretical power law, and I added a little bit of noise, right? The theoretical power law, by the way, if you're looking at what is called a log linear chart, so you're taking the log of a price, but a linear time, it will look like that red curve. It's curved like this, right? While an exponential will look like a straight line in that particular graph. And these are the two different theoretical curves. I added a little bit of noise to make it a little bit more realistic. And these are the two type of patterns that you get. You get this beautiful red line that is a power law, for the theoretical power law, and you get this kind of ribbon for the exponential. You see how we can identify and separate between the two, right? It's kind of clear. Then I took real data. I took the Bitcoin data on the left that is almost perfectly reproducing the theoretical result, you see? And then I took SP500, that is blue, and gold, that you don't see very well, but because it's underneath the data from the SP500. But you see how they follow the exponential behavior, right? Almost perfectly. It's not this a striking graph showing how Bitcoin is so different from anything else. It's for the artist in the room, it's almost like a master, a beautiful art piece, right? You could hang it in your room, maybe making it a little bit nicer, but it's really cool. It's really interesting, right? Way of showing that Bitcoin based in a very different way. It has very different properties. It's scale invariant. Scale invariant exactly means that you can look at the behavior at different scales, because we are talking about these ratios represents days, represents weeks, represents months, years, decades. And at all these different scale, the proportionality between the change in price and the change in time, it's the same. And this is why we call it scale invariant. It looks like it's self-similar. It's very similar. It's a very simplified form of fractal. It's like a very simple fractal where a Bitcoin looks like itself. Doesn't matter if you look at the days, months, years point of view. And such a behavior is so powerful and so universal that I doubt anything like people wanted to change the system and doing strange things. They will change it locally, but all the other forces that are working to create this pattern, that are basically all the things that are happening at all levels, people interacting with each other, holding, going to conferences, orange peeling other people, all these things that are not financial, they are due to other kind of mechanism that are not simply people selling and buy on a market. This is why it doesn't follow the market efficient hypothesis, because there are other things happening. There is the mining, the energy involved in the system. There is the social aspects of it. All these things together make Bitcoin behave like red curve, and all the other financial system like SP500, gold. I could add anything else here. I can add Nasdaq. They all will behave in that way, because in the long term, all these other systems are basically exponential. And why they are exponential? Because of inflation. They follow inflation very closely. They are nothing else than a slight little margin against inflation. If you look at the last 25 years of SP500 growth, it's mostly being explained by inflation, just a little bit more. Maybe, instead of, I think you make like 4 times or something, like in the last 25 years, you will have made 4 times your money. 50% of that is gone just by inflation. So this is why overall, most of these financial systems, they look like exponentials. It's bad exponentials. It's, the government printing money, mostly of it. And Bitcoin follows something else, mostly because the mechanism behind driving the Bitcoin price are different, are really different. That demonstration, visual demonstration, it's very powerful, right? It shows that it's the odds man out. It really behaves different from anything else. Do you have any question about the graph and what it represents and what it's trying to show?
Well, unfortunately, our time for today is almost at an end, but I wanted to say this has been a fascinating exploration, and I appreciate your in-depth answers to the questions that were posed. It seems to me, by way of a concluding remark, that this ability for the price of Bitcoin to continue on this future growth trajectory will require some sort of major expansion in the growth of the network, some continued growth in adoption, and for governments not to thwart it too much. There is some skepticism toward Bitcoin right now, especially from the US federal government, but other governments, such as the government of China, which tried to ban it at some point. But I do wonder if there will be some attempt to adapt to Bitcoin rather than crack down on it as well in the coming years. And if so, then this kind of growth in adoption, growth in the network may continue. But thank you, Giovanni. And there will be certainly more opportunities to explore the Bitcoin power law theory. You have left our audience with much to think about. And I hope that all of you can look into Giovanni's work in greater depth, and that as Bitcoin hopefully does follow the power law that he explained, we will be able to live long and prosper.
Thank you so much.